When I was 30 years old, I was in graduate school and I went for the summer to Mexico City to work in a shelter for abused women and children. And I was working with those children, and I think that exposed me to chickenpox. I started having what seemed to be more symptoms than you typically hear about. I literally had them everywhere. I had some in my mouth, I had them on my scalp, I had them all down my arms and legs, on my torso, on my back. Every place you could imagine there were pox. And in many places they were so close together that it was just giant redness. And it took a lot of self-control not to just spend my time scratching and making horrible scars. And you're sweaty from having a fever, and so a number of them did get infected and get a little pus and scabs. And at some point in the process, it did start to get a little difficult for me to breathe. Anytime I took anything more than a shallow breath, it really hurt, and there were certain spots in my body, in my lungs, that it hurt. And I did find out later that it was pneumonia, chickenpox pneumonia. There were pox inside my lungs. So I had to try not to take a really deep breath, and it just meant I was concentrating a lot on my breathing and trying to breathe in a way that wouldn't hurt too much, but also being really scared that there was something serious going on. It was pretty scary to get ill by myself in a foreign country without access to medical assistance and without family around to support me. I also knew I wouldn't be able to travel because it's an infectious disease, so it wasn't like I could just hop on a plane or a train and go back home. I think it was probably somewhere in the range of 2 to 3 weeks that I was on my own in my apartment, just trying to make it through the process. It was only when the pox on my skin had cleared up that I was allowed to go on an airplane, but I still had my problems breathing, and it took about 2 months after that for the breathing to feel normal again. I never knew chickenpox could get into your lungs. I never had heard of anything called chickenpox pneumonia, so when I went to the doctor and they told me that these feelings I had in my lungs was in fact linked to pneumonia, it was quite scary because pneumonia is something that kills people, and I realized if something had suddenly taken a turn for the worse, I wouldn't have had anybody there to help me, and it was sort of scary after the fact thinking about what could have been. Many years later, I realized it has done something to my lungs. It's left sort of permanent scarring in my lungs that impacts me every time I get a cold or try to go camp out and there's a smoky fire or something like that. I just had no idea that it was going to stay with me the rest of my life in that way. I think a lot of people have the belief I did before this happened to me that chickenpox isn't a big deal, that it's something that everybody went through and you get through it and then you're immune. Of course, I would make sure my kids got the chickenpox vaccine, and I would want every parent to at least make sure they understand what all the side effects are to chickenpox, and that it's not necessarily the benign thing that often we grow up thinking that it is.